Hey guys, just a quick game to share with you today, and an important lesson, very important lesson for me. And what we're looking at here is when you have an advantage in a game, that it's very important not to lose sight of your defense. Right? Don't just only focus on winning the game as quickly as possible. You've always got to have a balance between winning and not losing. So let me take you through this game because it's good. And my opponent's rated like 1450, good player. He starts with e4 and I play the French, e6. When the knight comes out to f3, I think c5 is the only move. And then a slow move, h3. It's preventing knights and bishops, I guess, from coming to g4. That's the only purpose of that. Knight comes out to c6, so we're almost like a Sicilian now. Knight to c3, and now I push the d5 pawn. He captures and I recapture, so we've got like a French exchange variation on the board. But I've got this stronger centre right now with these pawns here, controlling those squares, that's good. Now d3, I bring out my other knight, and he pushes d4. So I've got a choice here. I mean, I can take, and then knight will probably take. Then I could recapture with the knight, and then queen could take. And so I have to kind of look at what would the board look like with those pawns and the knights off the board and his queen in the middle. I think he's slightly improved his position, right? So what I do in the game is I just push c4. And I quite like that because it's going to make it slightly harder for this bishop to come out. The bishop can only come out now to e2, and it's just taking this square away from him. So I'm quite comfortable at this point. So now the bishop does come out to e2. I bring out my dark square bishop to pin his knight. He breaks the pin with his bishop and I castle. Now he pushes a3 to kick my bishop, and I bring it back to d6. And my intention is to drop my bishop back to one of these squares, put my queen there. This is a stock attack for me when I play the French exchange variation. Okay, so that's the reason why I put it on that square in particular. Now white castles, I drop my bishop back. Knight comes in to harass my bishop, so I drop it all the way back now to ba. I don't want to lose that bishop. It's key to my attack. Now clearly this knight has taken away these two squares from my queen, so I'm going to want to kick that knight away at some point. Bishop comes out to attack my knight, that's not a problem. So I go to kick his knight. If bishop takes knight, I can recapture with the queen, and that's okay. There we go. And now the knight retreats. And now I decide, because I've got these two wonderful bishops here now, right? My light square bishop hasn't even moved, and it's about to, it's forming part of a really good attack. So I notice I've got a couple of ideas here. I've got using that dark square diagonal to drop my queen in. But I've also got this idea now, very standard tactic, of capturing on h3 now that that pawn has been pushed, because the queen is here, so this pawn is pinned on the king. This pawn cannot recapture. Yeah? Can I do it in red? Yeah, it cannot recapture. So I just slightly changed my plan here, but I'm very lucky position that I've got a lot of ideas going on. So bishop takes, and of course I'm then threatening mate in one. It's going to be a winning approach. White now dodges out of that, so he's unpinned this pawn. So now if bishop takes, the pawn can capture legally. That's all right. So I go back to my other plan. Queen across, but then I realise pretty quickly this knight is actually covering the h2 square, so I can't just dive in with mate. First I have to remove the knight. Okay, he brings his knight out, which I think was a mistake because it's a key defender. So I simply take it off, he recaptures, and I grab a pawn. So I'm now a pawn up, and I've still got these killer bishops eyeing down on the king's side. Now white pushes a pawn. I just drop my queen back, and he grabs a pawn back with his knight. That's not a problem. Now I bring my queen back in, so now I'm in a position to capture this pawn if I well, I'm not, because he has now got two defenders, hasn't he? Yeah. But so I've got ideas now of maybe bishop takes pawn, if pawn takes, queen takes, and then king would have to move there, queen moves there, and that's checkmate. Okay. Now the bishop comes in to defend, so I swap off the bishop, And if queen takes, pawn takes, and now this king is looking exposed. He's got doubled pawns on the g-file. I've still got a nice dark squared bishop looking down on there. Material is equal, but my pawns are better. You know, I could play b5 at some point, put my pawns in a nice structure. My king is lovely and safe tucked away there. This really is my game to win. So I bring my bishop now to, because I realise actually there's a danger of maybe the knight coming in to one of these squares, attacking my rook. I also need to be careful about forks there, so I decide to put my bishop onto a7, just taking this option away from white, and I probably will want to push that at some point. Rook comes across to attack the knight, rook comes across to defend the knight. Now, so this is the idea with the bishop. So the bishop is now covering the g1 square. So all I need to do is check the king with a rook, and it's checkmate. Okay, and I get really excited about this idea, but I take my eye off the ball. So knight now comes in with check, and this is the kind of tactic that I need to be checking for every single time, right? When an important piece and a knight are in this position, okay, 1, 2, 3 jumps away diagonally, then it means that the knight has an attack on one turn, okay? So in the case of the king, this knight can come to either square, right, put me in check, right? I could capture the knight with a pawn, but I'm going to lose my rook, okay? So he comes in with check, and yeah, so obviously for f6 I could have captured with a pawn. In this situation I only have to move, and I've blundered my rook, okay? In my excitement to rush the checkmate, I've blundered a rook. Okay, so it goes there, and now I'm a rook down. Fortunately I have this skewer, but it doesn't really help because the rook just comes down. He's now got 2 defenders and I can't recapture with a king. So all I can do is push b5, and the game doesn't go on for too much longer really. I'm still trying ideas. So my next idea is to get rid of the h-pawn somehow, and then get my rook over here. This square is still covered by my bishop, remember? So all I have to do is get a rook onto an open file, and there could be a checkmate. But yeah, he comes in with a pawn, I try and run away, and now there's a rook fork. I just walk into this, and I have to resign the game. So, you know, this is one of those times when it all pivots on one particular move, right? And this was the move. So I failed to notice this pattern, right? When the knight is there, my king is checkable, right? So all I needed to do in this position was maybe king to f8, right? Then if the knight moves, doesn't matter where the knight moves really, he could go to there and attack my rook. It doesn't matter, I can capture his rook. Whatever he does, you know, I can now lift my rook, and this knight cannot attack my rook or my king. So, you know, for the sake of just one simple king move, the game turned, and I went from a clearly winning position to losing, right? So the lessons from this, you've got to remember those tactics. You've got to remember that those tactical patterns, and most importantly, slow down and make sure that your defense is there, that your king is safe when you're launching an attack. Because there's no point launching an attack if your opponent can come in, win material, checkmate you, whatever. So a harsh lesson, but I thought it was important to share with you. See you next time.